My granddaughter invited me for Christmas, saying it wouldn't be the same without me. Then, after taking my money, she abandoned me at the airport. She thought I was just a sweet, fragile old lady she could push around whenever it was convenient. She had no idea that when she left me standing there, suitcase in hand, she wasn't just leaving her grandmother behind. She was unleashing a storm. And I was about to take the very house she lived in, the one I helped her buy. Before I tell you exactly how it all went down, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Go ahead and drop your city or your country and what time it is for you in the comments below. It truly makes my day to see this little community we have here. Okay, let's begin. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my small Florida condo, watching the palm trees sway outside my window, when my phone buzzed with a video call. It was Jessica, my granddaughter. Her face filled the screen, bright and smiling, my great-grandkids waving in the background. "Grandma Ellie," she chirped, her voice dripping with a sweetness I hadn't heard in years. "We were just talking about you. The kids miss you so much." My heart did a little flutter. Since my husband, Robert, passed away, the visits had become phone calls, and the phone calls had become texts. I hadn't seen them in person in almost 3 years. "I miss you all too, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Well," she said, leaning closer to the camera, "we were thinking you have to come to Charlotte for Christmas this year. You just have to. It wouldn't be Christmas without you here. We need you." The words, "we need you," echoed in my chest. It was a feeling I thought I packed away for good, like my old wedding dress. Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing. I immediately said yes. The thought of smelling a real pine tree again, of watching the kids open their presents, it was everything I'd been secretly praying for. A few days later, Jessica called again. This time, her voice was different. A little strained, a little hesitant. "Hey, Grandma. So I was just looking at the car and with the winter weather coming, you know how the roads can get up here. I really think we need a new set of tires for the SUV, just to make sure it's completely safe when we come to pick you up from the airport." I nodded into the phone. "Oh, of course, honey. Safety first." There was a pause. "Yeah," she said, drawing the word out. "The thing is, they're pretty expensive. Things are a little tight right now with the holidays and all. I was wondering, and please say no if you can't, but maybe you could help us out, like an early Christmas gift? It would be about $500. My retirement savings weren't bottomless, but for the safety of my family, for the guarantee of being picked up from the airport, it felt like a small price to pay. "Of course, sweetie. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll transfer it to you right now." The relief in her voice was immediate and effusive. "Oh, Grandma, thank you. You're a lifesaver. We can't wait to see you." The next 2 weeks were a blur of happy preparations. I dug out my big suitcase, bought a new pair of comfortable shoes for the airport, and even found my old handwritten recipe for gingerbread cookies, the one with the extra ginger that Robert had loved so much. I packed gifts for the kids, a hand-knitted scarf for little Leo, and a set of art supplies for Mia. For Jessica, I packed the special cranberry orange relish she always raved about. I chose my favorite crimson cardigan to wear on the plane, the one Jessica once said made me look festive and regal. I was ready. I was more than ready. I was full of a joy so pure, it felt like it could light up the whole city. I transferred the money, happy to help, never once suspecting it was the first thread in a web of lies they were weaving for me. The day of my flight, December 22nd, arrived with a crisp, cool Florida morning. I was up before the sun, my heart thrumming with an energy I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. I double-checked my carry-on, phone, charger, boarding pass, a small bag of homemade peppermint bark for the pilots. I was so excited, I barely tasted my morning coffee. The taxi arrived right on time, and as I settled into the back seat, I took one last look at my quiet condo, knowing that soon I'd be surrounded by the beautiful chaos of family on Christmas. The flight was smooth. I chatted with the young woman next to me, a college student heading home for the holidays. I told her all about my grandchildren, about how I was going to teach them to make gingerbread men. She smiled and said she reminded her of her own grandmother. It warmed me from the inside out. All around me was the buzz of holiday travel, the excited chatter, the festive sweaters, the sense of people going home to the ones they loved. And I was one of them. We landed at Charlotte Douglas International Airport right on time at 3:17 p.m. The sky outside was a beautiful wintry gray, promising a cozy evening. I walked off the plane with a bounce in my step, my crimson cardigan a bright spot of color in the bustling terminal. I made my way to the arrivals area, right by the baggage claim, just as Jessica and I had agreed. I found a spot with a clear view of the entrance doors and stood there, beaming, ready to be swept up in a hug. And I waited. The first wave of passengers from my flight found their families. Hugs, squeals of delight, children running into outstretched arms. I smiled, watching the reunions, my eyes scanning the crowd for Jessica's familiar blonde hair or Mark's tall frame. Nothing. I checked my watch. 3:45 p.m. Maybe traffic was bad. It was the holidays after all. I sent a quick text, landed safely, so excited to see you all. No reply. I waited. 4:15 p.m. The crowd from my flight was gone. A new wave of passengers from a flight from Dallas began to pour out. The initial excitement in my chest started to curdle into a cold knot of anxiety. I pulled out my phone and called Jessica. It rang and rang and went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Jessica." My hand started to tremble slightly. I took a deep breath. "Okay, don't panic, Eleanor. She's probably just driving. Can't answer the phone." I called Mark. Same thing. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. Now the anxiety was turning into a dull, heavy ache. I found a hard plastic bench nearby and sat down, my suitcase pulled close to me like a shield. I stared at the automatic glass doors, my heart leaping every time they slid open, but it was never them. It was families and couples and business travelers. It was everyone in the world except the people who were supposed to be there for me.
At 4:45 p.m., I had been waiting for over an hour and a half. The festive cheer of the airport now felt like a mockery. I felt a familiar sting behind my eyes, the one that always came with disappointment. I felt small, foolish, and invisible. I tried calling Jessica one last time. This time, it went straight to voicemail. They had ignored my call. My heart sank into my orthopedic shoes. My phone finally buzzed in my trembling hand. A message. Relief washed over me for a split second. But what I read next wasn't an apology. It was a cold, hard slap in the face. The text message lit up my screen, stark and impersonal. It was from Jessica. 5 simple, brutal words. "Can you just grab an Uber?" That was it. No, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. There was a huge accident on I-77. No, the kids are sick. We're so sorry we can't be there." Not even an explanation. Just, "Grab an Uber." Like I was a pizza delivery. Like my arrival, the one she had begged for, was now an inconvenience to be outsourced. Underneath it, she had pasted the address, 1245 Willow Creek Drive. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as tears welled in my eyes. I thought of the $500 I'd sent for safe new tires to pick me up. The lie was so audacious, so cruel, it stole the air from my lungs. My entire body felt cold, a deep cellular chill that had nothing to do with the December air. I felt like a fool. A 76-year-old fool in a bright red cardigan sitting alone on a hard bench in an airport 3 states from home. Something inside me, something I thought was long gone, began to stir. It was anger, a slow, cold burn. As I sat there, trying to process the sheer audacity of it all, I absent-mindedly opened my Facebook app. It was a habit, a way to see pictures of the great-grandkids. The first thing on my feed was a post from one of Jessica's friends, a woman I'd met a few times. She had just tagged Jessica and a group of other women in a photo. The photo was time-stamped 30 minutes ago. It showed Jessica, Mark, and another couple raising glasses of champagne at a fancy-looking restaurant. Jessica was laughing, her head thrown back, looking radiant and carefree. My eyes darted to the location tag above the photo, the Gilded Sparrow Bistro, South Park. I knew Charlotte a little from my previous visits. South Park was a wealthy area, not far from the airport. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't dealing with a family emergency. They were at brunch. They were celebrating, kicking off their holiday weekend, while I sat here alone, waiting, after I had paid for the very tires on the car they couldn't be bothered to drive. That was it. That was the moment the old Eleanor, the one who would have quietly called an Uber, swallowed her hurt, and showed up at their door with a smile, died. She died right there on that hard plastic bench, and a new Eleanor was born. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness anymore. It was rage, a righteous, clarifying rage. I stood up. I wiped the single tear that had escaped from my eye. I straightened my crimson cardigan. I did not text back. I did not call an Uber. I turned my back on the arrivals lane and walked with a purpose I hadn't felt in years, right towards the hotel information desk. They wanted me to be an afterthought? Fine. I would give them a Christmas they would never, ever forget. Right there in that cold, impersonal airport terminal, I made a decision. But I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have Ubered to their house and pretended nothing happened? Or would you have done what I did? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to read your thoughts. They thought I would crumble and obey. They thought I was just the sweet, old, convenient grandma. But they had no idea they had just awakened a part of me that had been dormant for decades. The young woman at the hotel desk had a kind face. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I need a room, just for one night for now." She booked me into a cozy-looking Marriott just 10 minutes from the airport. A shuttle was arriving in 5 minutes. As I handed her my credit card, she smiled. "In town for the holidays to see family?" I gave her a tight, small smile back. You could say I was supposed to be. The hotel room was clean, quiet, and blessedly anonymous. I dropped my suitcase by the door and sat on the edge of the crisp white duvet. I took off my shoes and rubbed my aching feet. The physical ache was nothing compared to the gaping wound in my chest. How dare they? How dare they make me feel like a burden for accepting an invitation they had extended? How dare they lie, take my money, and then leave me stranded? I fought the urge to cry. Crying was what the old Eleanor would have done. The new Eleanor made phone calls. I scrolled through my contacts and my finger paused on a name. Carol. My neighbor for 30 years in Florida before she moved to a retirement community an hour away. We still talked every week. She was my rock. I tapped the screen. She answered on the second ring. "Ellie, Merry Christmas Eve! Did you make it to Charlotte okay?" My resolve wavered for a second. I could lie, say everything was wonderful, but I was done with lies. "Well, Carol, I made it to Charlotte, but my welcoming committee seems to have been detained." I told her everything. The phone call for tire money, the long wait, the Uber text, the champagne brunch on Facebook. I expected her to gasp, to cluck her tongue in sympathy. Instead, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice as hard as steel, "That girl has some nerve. Eleanor, you are not spending Christmas alone in a hotel room. Absolutely not. Carol, it's fine. Really. I'll just—" "No," she cut me off. "You listen to me. My nephew David lives in Charlotte. He and his wife Susan, sweetest people you'll ever meet. Their plans just fell through. Their son's a pilot and got called into work. They're going to be all alone for Christmas dinner. You are going to be their guest. I'm calling him right now. Don't you move a muscle." Before I could protest, she had hung up. Part of me wanted to argue, to not be a burden on yet another family, but a bigger part of me was so starved for simple kindness that it ached. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Eleanor Vance? This is David, Carol's nephew. My aunt tells me you're in town and in need of a Christmas dinner. We would absolutely be honored if you would join us tomorrow."
The next day, David picked me up from the hotel. He was a man in his late 50s with his aunt's kind eyes. He carried my suitcase, insisted on treating me to a coffee on the way, and ushered me into his home, where his wife, Susan, greeted me with a hug that felt more genuine than any I had received in years. Their home was filled with the smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon. It was filled with warmth. It was filled with a welcome so real and unconditional, it made my heart ache with a strange mix of joy and sorrow. As I sat there, laughing with people who were strangers just hours before, my phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Jessica. What they said now only strengthened my resolve. My phone, which I'd placed on silent in my purse, was buzzing like an angry hornet. During a quiet moment, while Susan was checking on the gravy, I pulled it out. A string of texts from Jessica. 3:30 p.m. "Hey, where are you? The kids are asking for you." 4:15 p.m. "Grandma? Are you okay? Did you get my text?" 5 p.m. "We left the door unlocked for you. Are you coming?" 5:30 p.m. "Seriously? This isn't funny. Call me." The irony. This isn't funny? I wanted to laugh out loud. Being left at the airport wasn't funny. Being lied to wasn't funny. Being treated like an ATM and then a piece of forgotten luggage definitely wasn't funny. The fact that she was now annoyed, that my absence was now an inconvenience to her, was the final confirmation I needed. She wasn't worried, she was irritated. I powered the phone off completely and slipped it back into my purse. I would not give them the satisfaction of a response. They could sit in their silence. They could wonder. For once, they could feel a fraction of the uncertainty and disregard they had shown me. I spent the rest of the evening basking in the genuine warmth of David and Susan's company. We shared stories, they showed me pictures of their pilot son, and I even taught their teenage daughter my secret to a flaky pie crust. It was a perfect Christmas Eve. Later that night, back in the quiet of my hotel room, the second phase of my plan began to form. The anger had now cooled into a sharp, focused clarity. This wasn't just a ruined holiday. This was about a pattern of disrespect, of being taken for granted, of my financial contributions being accepted while my presence was merely tolerated. I thought back to 3 years ago, when Jessica and Mark were desperate to buy that house on Willow Creek Drive. Their credit wasn't great, and they were short on the down payment. I, a recent widow with Robert's life insurance money, had been their solution. I gave them $65,000 for the down payment, not as a gift, but as an investment in their future, with the written understanding that my name would be on the deed as a partial owner. I also had to co-sign on the mortgage to get them approved. The agreement, which I had insisted we get notarized, was clear. Within 24 months, they were to refinance the mortgage to remove my name and my liability, and we would reassess my equity share. It had been nearly 36 months. Had they ever mentioned it? No. With a deep breath, I opened the banking app on my phone. The joint account we had used for the initial transaction, the one they were supposed to have closed, was still active. My name was still on it. I clicked through to the linked mortgage information. My heart pounded in my ears as the page loaded. There it was. Eleanor Vance, still listed as a cosigner, still financially liable for their nearly $500,000 home. A wave of dizziness washed over me. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was reckless. They had left my entire financial future exposed. I started taking screenshots. The original agreement I had saved in my email, the current mortgage statement showing my name, the text messages from the airport. I saved everything into a neat little folder on my phone.
They had forgotten about the agreement. They had forgotten about their promise. They had forgotten who held the real power. The evidence was all there, clear as day. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had been actively using my name and my credit for years. And I was about to turn the tables in a way they never, ever saw coming. The day after Christmas, while the rest of Charlotte was sleeping in or hitting the sails, I was on a mission. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room, a cup of surprisingly good coffee in my hand, and looked up the number for my lawyer back in Florida. Mr. Davies was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had handled Robert's will. He was semi-retired but still took on cases that interested him. I hoped this one would. I left a message with his service, explaining that it was not an emergency, but a matter of some urgency regarding a property agreement. I didn't expect to hear back until after the new year, but to my surprise, he called me back that very afternoon. He said, "Eleanor, I got your message. Everything all right?" "I'm fine, William. Thank you for calling back so quickly," I began. "I have a bit of a situation and I need your counsel. It involves a financial agreement and a property I co-own in North Carolina." I spent the next 20 minutes laying out the entire story, from the $65,000 down payment to the notarized agreement, the mystery financing deadline, and the final galling incident at the airport. I emailed him the folder of screenshots while we were on the phone. There was a long silence on his end as he reviewed the documents. I could almost hear the gears turning in his sharp legal mind. "Well, I'll be damned," he said finally, with a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "Eleanor, they haven't just been disrespectful, they've been extraordinarily foolish. They are in clear breach of this agreement. Your name on that deed and mortgage give you significant leverage. So the question is, what do you want to do?" The old Eleanor would have asked for an apology. She would have wanted them to promise to do better. But the new Eleanor, the one forged in the cold fire of disrespect, wanted something else. She wanted justice. I said, my voice firm, "I want to enforce the agreement, William. I want you to draft a formal letter. I want to offer them two options. Option 1, they have 30 days to secure their own financing and buy me out completely, my initial $65,000, plus a reasonable appreciation based on the current market value. Or, option 2, if they cannot or will not meet that deadline, we initiate a forced sale of the property, and the profits will be split according to our legal shares." Another pause. "A forced sale is an aggressive move, Eleanor. It's the nuclear option. Are you sure?" I looked out the hotel window at the gray sky. "They left me at the airport after taking my money for the gas to get there. They were sipping champagne while I was crying on a bench. I have never been more sure of anything in my life."
"All right then," Mr. Davies said, a newfound energy in his voice. "Let's get to work. I'll need to consult with a North Carolina real estate attorney to ensure the language is ironclad, but we can have a demand letter drafted and sent via certified mail by the end of the week. They'll be served before New Year's Eve." I thanked him and hung up, a profound sense of calm settling over me. For years, I had felt like a guest in my own family, an optional extra. Now, I was reminding them that I wasn't just a guest in their lives, I was a co-owner of their house. The letter was sent, the clock was ticking. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. I decided to stay in Charlotte for a little while longer. My new friend Susan had insisted, saying the city was lovely after the holidays when the crowds thinned out. She took me to museums, we walked through Freedom Park, and I found a wonderful little yarn shop downtown. For the first time in years, I was doing things just for me. My phone remained silent. I hadn't reached out to Jessica, and, after that first flurry of annoyed texts, she hadn't tried to contact me again. The silence was its own kind of answer. The explosion came 5 days later. It was a cold, rainy afternoon. I was in my hotel room knitting a new scarf in a bold cobalt blue when there was a sharp, insistent knock on the door. It wasn't hotel housekeeping. It was the knock of someone who was angry. I looked through the peephole and my heart gave a little jolt. It was Jessica. She was standing in the hallway, her face pale and pinched, her knuckles white as she clutched her phone. She was wearing a stylish camel hair coat, but it couldn't hide the tremor of fury running through her. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. She stared at me as if she were seeing a ghost. "You're actually here?" "I never said I wasn't," I replied calmly, leaning against the doorframe. Her eyes darted past me, scanning the small, impersonal room, the neatly made bed, my knitting bag on the chair, the half-finished cup of tea on the nightstand. "We've been worried sick. We thought something happened to you." I raised an eyebrow. "Worried or annoyed that I upset your schedule?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The truth was quiet, but heavy. Her face flushed. "What is this?" she hissed, holding up her phone. I saw it was an image of the certified letter. "A letter from a lawyer threatening to sell our house? Are you insane?" "I believe the letter offers you the option to buy me out first. The selling is merely the consequence of inaction." "This is because of the airport, isn't it?" she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Because we were a little late? You're going to destroy our family over a small mistake?" There it was, the gaslighting, the minimization, the attempt to make me the unreasonable one. The old Eleanor would have withered under that accusation. The new Eleanor stood taller. "Jessica, it wasn't a small mistake. You lied. You took $500 from me for a specific purpose and then used it to go to brunch with your friends while I waited for you alone for nearly 2 hours. You didn't forget. You chose to disrespect me. There is a very big difference." She blinked, momentarily speechless. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know," I said, cutting her off. "What matters is that it was the final straw in a long line of them. This isn't just about Christmas, dear. This is about the $65,000 I gave you. It's about the notarized agreement you signed, promising to have me removed from the mortgage 2 years ago, an agreement you breached." I stepped back and gestured into the room. "Come in. I have a copy if you'd like to refresh your memory." Her jaw tightened. "I don't need to see it. Mark handles the finances. And that is no longer my problem. You have 30 days, Jessica. That is the conversation we are having. Not about your brunch plans or my feelings. We are having a business conversation because that is how you have chosen to treat me." She stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. She saw a woman she didn't recognize, a woman who would not be dismissed, belittled, or ignored, a woman who knew her rights and, for the first time, was demanding them. She left without another word, her face pale with shock. But this was just the beginning. I knew the next move wouldn't come from her. It would come from her husband, Mark. Just as I predicted, the next move came from Mark. He called 2 days later. His tone was completely different from Jessica's. No fire, no indignation. Instead, it was smooth, reasonable, and patronizing. It was the voice of a man used to calming down what he considered to be hysterical women. "Eleanor," he began, as if we were old friends discussing the weather, "I just want to start by saying we are so sorry about the mix-up at the airport. It was a complete failure of communication on our part, and Jessica feels just terrible about it." I remained silent, letting him talk. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "And about this letter," he continued with a sigh, "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We were, of course, planning to refinance. The interest rates just haven't been favorable, and we've been waiting for the right moment. We never intended for you to remain on the loan this long. The agreement you both signed stipulated 24 months, Mark, not when the interest rates are favorable.
It has been 36 months. My voice was quiet, factual. He cleared his throat. Yes, well, be that as it may, forcing us to come up with that kind of money in 30 days, Eleanor, that's just not possible. We have kids, a mortgage, you know how it is. I know that I upheld my end of the bargain. I also know that my entire financial well-being has been tied to your mortgage for 3 years, without my consent beyond the initial term. That is a risk I am no longer willing to take. He sighed again, a long, suffering sound. Look, Eleanor, what if we work something out? We can start paying you back in monthly installments. We can drop a new agreement. We can pay you your $65,000 back over, say, the next 3 years. That's reasonable, isn't it? It was a classic delay tactic. Kick the can down the road. Hope I would eventually soften, or that my health might fail, or that I would simply forget. They wanted to continue benefiting from my investment on their terms, offering me scraps to keep me quiet. No, Mark, I said simply. No? He sounded genuinely surprised. No, that is not reasonable, and it is not an option. The letter from my lawyer outlines the 2 available options very clearly. A full buyout of my equity share within 30 days, or the house goes on the market. There is no third option.
I have thought about the family, I said, my voice hardening for the first time. I thought about it when I gave you the money for the down payment so you could have a nice home. I thought about it when I flew across the country because you said you needed me for Christmas. And I thought about it when you left me abandoned at the airport. It seems I am the only one who has been thinking about the family. Your 30 days started when you received the letter. I suggest you use the remaining time wisely. I hung up the phone, my hand steady. They thought they could negotiate their way out of this with half measures, with placating words and empty promises. They still didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. It was time for phase 2. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, had recommended the next step. If they're dragging their feet, Eleanor, we don't wait, we act. We need a formal appraisal of the property to determine its current market value. That way we know exactly how much your equity share is worth. It shows them we are not bluffing. I agreed immediately. I wanted everything done by the book, clean and indisputable. Mr. Davies engaged a reputable Charlotte-based appraisal firm, and we scheduled it for the following week. Legally, as a co-owner on the deed, I had every right to be present. I made sure the appraiser's office informed them I would be attending. The morning of the appraisal was bright and cold. I wore a charcoal gray wool coat and a new sense of purpose. I took a taxi to Willow Creek Drive, a street I had once associated with family and hope. Now it just felt like a business address. I arrived a few minutes before the appraiser. I walked up the stone pathway to the front door, the same door I had imagined being opened with warm hugs just a week prior. Mark opened the door. The look on his face was a mixture of shock and resentment. He had clearly hoped I wouldn't actually show up. "Eleanor," he stammered, "we weren't expecting you to come in person. I am still a partial owner of this property, Mark. I am absolutely entitled to be present." The house was exactly as I remembered, yet felt completely different. It was immaculately clean, decorated with the kind of sterile, magazine-perfect taste that always felt more for show than for living. On the wall in the living room was a large gallery of family photos. Jessica and Mark on their wedding day, the kids at the beach, school pictures. I scanned the collection. There were no photos of me. Not a single one. Not from the years I helped raise Jessica when her own mother worked 2 jobs. Not from the holidays I had hosted and paid for. It was as if I didn't exist except on the legal documents that held their life together. The appraiser, a professional man named Gable, arrived and began his work. I followed him silently from room to room, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I was a ghost at the feast, an invisible presence they had tried to erase, now made flesh and walking through their sacred space. In the kitchen, I paused by the granite island.
I remember standing right here, helping Jessica prepare for a dinner party, and her snapping at me for using the wrong kind of salt. In the dining room, I remembered being seated at a small card table in the corner during one Thanksgiving because there wasn't enough room at the main table. Each room held a small, sharp memory of being diminished, of being treated as less than. When we finished, Mr. Gable was packing up his equipment in the foyer. Mark pulled me aside, his voice a low, desperate whisper. "Can we please just stop this, Eleanor? This is tearing Jessica apart. You don't want to cause all this trouble for your family." I turned to face him fully, my eyes locking onto his. "Trouble?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You think this is about causing trouble? You think the trouble didn't start when you left a 76-year-old woman alone in an airport lobby? You think it didn't start when you broke a legally binding agreement for over a year? You think this is the beginning of the trouble, Mark? This is the end of it." He swallowed hard, unable to meet my gaze. He had no answer. He knew I was right. As I left the house that day and stepped into the cold, crisp air, I felt a strange sense of peace. They were about to learn the true value of what they had lost. The appraisal report came back 3 days later. The housing market in their desirable Charlotte suburb had boomed. The house was worth nearly $100,000 more than when they had bought it. My initial $65,000 investment had grown substantially. Mr. Davies calculated my precise equity share and sent a final formal offer to their lawyer, a specific dollar amount for the buyout with a non-negotiable deadline of 5 business days. The days ticked by. Silence. No call from Mark, no email from their lawyer. Nothing. They were calling my bluff. They still, after all of this, believed that when it came down to it, I wouldn't go through with it. They still believed the soft-hearted, accommodating Eleanor was in there somewhere and would eventually back down to keep the peace. On the final day of the deadline, I sat in my hotel room, looking out at the city lights. There was no peace to keep. There was only my self-respect to reclaim. I called my lawyer. "They've missed the deadline, William," I said. "I see that, Eleanor. What are your instructions?" "List the house," I said, without a moment's hesitation. "Immediately." "Is sure?" "I am." The next morning it was done. Mr. Davies engaged a top real estate agent in Charlotte that he had vetted. Because my name was on the deed, I had the legal authority to approve the listing. I signed the documents electronically from my hotel room. That afternoon, a man from the real estate agency drove a small metal post into the perfectly manicured front lawn of 1245 Willow Creek Drive. He attached a sign to it. Big, bold, impossible to miss letters. For sale. The listing went live on Zillow and Realtor.com at 4 p.m. It featured professional photos of the pristine kitchen and the spacious backyard. It listed the square footage, the number of bedrooms, and the asking price, which was set to attract immediate offers. The house was a desirable property in a hot market. It would not last long. At 4:17 p.m., my phone began to ring. It was Jessica. I looked at her name on the screen, then set the phone face down on the nightstand. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Mark. I ignored that call too. Then a text message from Jessica. "They are putting a for sale sign in our yard. Call me right now." Another one. "You can't do this. This is our home." Then one from Mark. "Eleanor, pick up the phone. You have gone too far." I took a deep breath. I felt a tremor in my hands, but it wasn't fear. It was the exhilarating, terrifying feeling of power. I picked up the phone and turned it completely off. I slipped on my coat and walked out of the hotel. I went to a nice Italian restaurant I'd been wanting to try, sat at a table for one, and ordered a glass of expensive Cabernet.
When the waiter asked if I was celebrating anything, I looked up from my menu, smiled, and said, "Yes, a closing." Thank you so much for sticking with me on this journey. It means the world. If you're still here, do me a favor and just type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Okay, let's get back to it. The for sale sign was up, and all hell was about to break loose. It didn't take long for the news to ripple through their suburban world. The for sale sign was a public declaration,
a neighborhood spectacle. The next morning, I received a Facebook message from a woman who used to live next door to Jessica, someone I'd met at a few summer barbecues. "Eleanor, I was so surprised to see this sign in Jessica and Mark's yard. Are they moving? Is everything okay?" I typed back a simple, truthful reply. "They will be moving. I hope they'll be okay." I didn't offer any more details. I didn't need to defend my actions or air our dirty laundry. The truth, like a sturdy oak tree, didn't need me to prop it up. It could stand on its own. The real estate agent called me that afternoon. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "The response has been incredible. We have 6 showings scheduled for tomorrow already, and 2 potential buyers who want to know if you're open to preemptive offers." The news should have made me feel triumphant, but instead it just felt final. This was really happening. The life they had built, propped up by my money and my name, was being dismantled, board by board. That evening, I turned my phone back on. There was a long voicemail from Jessica. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I knew I needed to hear it. I needed to know if there was any remorse, any understanding. I pressed play. Her voice, when it came, was not angry anymore. It was trembling, choked with tears. It was the voice of someone whose perfect world was crumbling around them. "Grandma, please call this off. The kids, Mia came home from school today and asked why there was a sign in our yard. She asked if we had to leave our home. What am I supposed to tell her? You're breaking up our family. You're punishing them for our mistake." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I know we hurt you. I know we were wrong. But this is too much. Don't you remember all the good times? Don't you love us anymore? You used to love us." I sat in the quiet of my hotel room, the sound of her recorded sobs echoing in the space. I listened to the words she chose. "You're breaking our family. You're punishing them. You used to love us." It was all about what I was doing to them. There was still no real ownership, no deep soul-searching acknowledgement of the pain they had caused me. She didn't say, "I understand why you feel you had to do this." She didn't say, "I broke your trust and I am so deeply sorry." She said, "You're hurting us." But they were the ones who had started the breaking. They had broken my trust. They had broken my heart. They had broken their promise. They had done it all quietly, behind closed doors, with ignored phone calls and dismissive texts. All I was doing was sweeping up the shards of what they had already shattered, and they couldn't stand the noise it was making. Her final words, "You used to love us," hung in the air. Oh, sweet girl, I thought. I did love you. I loved you enough to help you buy a house. I loved you enough to fly across the country for you. My love was never the problem. The problem was you took that love and you treated it like it was worthless. I deleted the voicemail. It was too little, far too late. The house sold in 4 days. A young doctor and his family, relocating from California, made an all-cash offer that was $20,000 over the asking price. There was no inspection contingency, and they wanted to close in 2 weeks. It was a clean, fast, undeniable deal. Jessica and Mark had no choice but to accept it. The closing was handled remotely. I signed my portion of the paperwork from a notary's office in Charlotte. Then Mr. Davies' office overnighted it to the closing attorney. A few days later, a certified check arrived at my lawyer's office. It was for my full, appraised equity share. After paying Mr. Davies his fee, the remaining amount was wired directly into my bank account. I stared at the number on my screen. It was more money than I'd had since Robert's life insurance payout. But it didn't feel like a lottery win. It felt like restitution. It was the tangible result of standing up for myself. It was the price of my own dignity. I didn't fly back to Florida. Something had shifted in me during my time in North Carolina. I felt different, stronger. I didn't want to go back to my quiet, lonely condo. I wanted to go somewhere new. I had once taken a watercolor painting retreat in the mountains of North Carolina, in a town called Asheville. I remembered its vibrant art scene, its crisp mountain air, the friendly, creative people. It felt like a place where a woman could start over, no matter her age. I spent the next few days on my laptop in the hotel, browsing real estate listings in Asheville. I wasn't looking for a big house. I was looking for a haven. And I found it. A 2-bedroom condo in a small, quiet complex with a large balcony that looked out over the Blue Ridge Mountains. It had huge windows, a modern kitchen, and smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I made an offer, and it was accepted. I used a portion of my payout to buy it outright. No mortgage, no co-signers, no one to answer to but myself. A week later, I checked out of the hotel in Charlotte for the last time. I had rented a small moving van to transport the few boxes of belongings I'd had shipped from my Florida condo. I drove myself the 2 hours west, up into the mountains, and as I unlocked the door to my new home and carried in the first box, a profound sense of peace washed over me. No one was there to greet me, no one was there to help me unpack. And it was wonderful. I wasn't waiting for anyone, I wasn't depending on anyone's schedule or mood. I was building this life, my life, on my terms. That first night, I didn't even unpack my bed. I pulled a chair up to the large sliding glass door, wrapped myself in my cobalt blue scarf, and just watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and pink. I had my sketchbook with me. I hadn't drawn in it for years. Robert had always been the one to encourage my art, and after he died, the pencils felt too heavy. But now, my fingers itched to create. I opened to a fresh page. I didn't draw the mountains. I drew a picture of a woman, older, with lines of experience on her face, standing alone at an airport. She wasn't crying. She was looking forward, a small, determined smile on her lips, as if she could see a future no one else could.
I was finally building a life on my own terms, but I couldn't shake the feeling that one final piece of the past was still to come. The next few months were a quiet renaissance. I settled into my new life in Asheville with a sense of calm I hadn't realized I was missing. I found a rhythm that was all my own. I woke up with the sun, had my coffee on the balcony watching the morning mist burn off the mountains, and spent my days exploring. I joined the local library, discovered a wonderful little bakery with the best sourdough bread, and for the first time in years, I started painting again. I set up a small easel by the window and filled canvas after canvas with the colors of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The heavy feeling I once associated with painting was gone, replaced by a light, joyful freedom. I was painting for myself, and it felt like coming home. I hadn't spoken to Jessica or Mark since the sale of the house closed. I knew from my old friend Carol that they had found a smaller rental home in a less expensive part of Charlotte. I tried not to think about them too much. I was focused on moving forward, not looking back. Then, one afternoon in early spring, a letter arrived. It was in a simple white envelope addressed to me in handwriting I recognized instantly. Jessica's. There was no return address. My first instinct was to throw it away, to not let her words disturb the peace I had worked so hard to build. But curiosity and perhaps a flicker of that old grandmotherly love won out. I slid it open with my kitchen knife. The letter was 2 pages long, written on simple lined paper. "Dear Grandma," it began, "I don't know if this will even reach you. I don't know if you'll read it. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it in the trash. I probably would. I think about what happened at Christmas every single day. Not a day goes by that I don't see you in my mind's eye, standing alone at the airport. I've tried to make excuses for myself. I was stressed, I was distracted, I was selfish. But none of them make it right. There is no excuse for what I did. The truth is, I had gotten used to you always being there, always being the one to give, always being the one to understand. I took your love and your support for granted. I treated it like a utility, like the water that comes out of the tap, always there when I needed it, but never something I stopped to appreciate. And when you finally turned off the tap, I was shocked. And instead of realizing my own thirst, I got angry at you for it. Losing the house was hard. It was humiliating. But the hardest part has been trying to explain to the kids why Grandma doesn't call anymore. And the truth is, it's because of me. I let my pride and my selfishness break something beautiful. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I am sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Not just for leaving you at the airport, but for all the little ways I dismissed you and took from you for years. I hope you are okay. I hope you are happy. I love you. We all love you. Jessica. I read the letter twice. There were no requests, no demands, no hidden agenda. It was just an apology. A real one. I folded the letter and placed it on my kitchen counter. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a sudden urge to call her, but I felt a subtle shift inside me, like a frozen river finally beginning to thaw at the edges. I folded the letter not with anger, but with a quiet sense of an ending. But was it an ending or a new, fragile beginning? The letter didn't change everything, but it changed something. It was a period at the end of a long, painful sentence, allowing a new paragraph to begin. I didn't write back right away. I needed to let her words settle, to understand what they meant for me, not just for her. My life in Asheville continued to blossom. The community center downtown offered a senior watercolor class, and I signed up. The other students were a lively group of retirees, former teachers, engineers, and nurses, all with stories of their own. For the first time in a long time, I was just Eleanor. Not Grandma, not Mom, not Robert's widow, just Eleanor, the woman who had a good eye for color and a steady hand. After a few weeks, the woman who ran the center, a kind lady named Maria, approached me. She said, "Eleanor, I've been watching your work. It's wonderful. We're starting an after-school art program for underprivileged kids. We need volunteers to help teach. Would you be interested?" Years ago, I had offered to teach Jessica's kids how to draw, and she had brushed me off with a comment about how they preferred their iPads. Now here was a stranger, offering me a classroom of children wanting what I had to give. "Yes," I said, a wide smile spreading across my face. Teaching the children was a revelation. Their energy, their uninhibited creativity, it was infectious. They didn't care about my age or my past. They just cared that I could show them how to mix the perfect shade of green for a dragon's scale, or how to draw a horse that actually looked like it was running. It filled a part of my heart I didn't even know was empty. One sunny Saturday in May, I was at the city's weekly farmers market buying fresh herbs for my balcony garden. As I was paying for a pot of rosemary, I heard a small, hesitant voice. "Grandma Ellie?" I turned, and there they were, Jessica, Mark, and the two kids. They were standing a few feet away, looking uncertain. It was the first time I had seen them in person in almost 6 months. Jessica looked thinner, her face less tense than I remembered. My great-grandson Lego took a tentative step forward. "Is it really you?" I knelt down slowly, my old knees protesting a bit. "It's really me, Sweet Pea." He rushed forward and wrapped his little arms around my neck. I hugged him back tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair. I had missed this more than I could say. I looked up and saw tears glistening in Jessica's eyes. She stepped forward, Mark, a supportive presence by her side. She didn't try to make excuses or force a conversation. She just said, her voice soft, "Can we talk sometime? On the phone?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the genuine remorse in her eyes. I saw the daughter of my daughter, a woman who had made a terrible mistake and was trying to find her way back. "Yes," I said. "We can." I paused, then added, "I'd like that." It wasn't a promise of forgiveness. It wasn't a return to the way things were. It was just a door, which had been slammed shut and bolted, being opened just a crack. He hugged me,
And in that moment, I knew that while some things could never be fully repaired, perhaps they could be rebuilt into something new, something stronger.
The phone calls started a week later. They were short at first and a little awkward. We talked about the weather, about the kids' school, about my art classes. We didn't talk about the house or the money or the airport. We were walking on new ground, and we were walking carefully. Over the summer, they drove up to Asheville to visit. Not to stay with me, but they got a hotel. We met in a park. It was a neutral space. We watched the kids play, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Jessica apologized again, this time to my face. I listened, and I accepted it. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting that it happened and choosing to not let it poison the future. The relationship we are building now is different. It's stronger because it's built on a foundation of truth and respect, not just obligation and habit. I don't give them money, but I give them my time when they earn it. They don't take me for granted because they know my absence is a real possibility. They know I am a woman who is perfectly happy on her own. My love for them is still there, but now it's balanced by my love for myself. This past Christmas, I hosted dinner in my own home. My new friends from the art class came. David and Susan, the wonderful couple who took me in, drove up from Charlotte. And Jessica, Mark, and the kids came too. My small condo was filled with laughter and warmth, a beautiful mix of the family I was born into and the family I had chosen. That night, as I was setting the table, I put out one extra plate. It was a symbolic gesture, one just for me. It was for the woman I used to be, the one who thought her worth was measured by how much she could give to others. And it was for the woman I had become, the one who stood alone at the airport and chose herself. That extra plate was a reminder. Always save a place at the table for your own dignity. You are the most important guest in your own life. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes self-respect has to be the thickest of all. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. You can love your family with all your heart, but you must never, ever do it at the expense of your own soul. Setting a boundary isn't an act of war. It's an act of preservation. I want to thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the story reach others who might need to hear this message. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more stories about life, family, and finding your strength. And now I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you had to draw a hard line in the sand to protect your own peace and dignity? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who you might be inspiring. Your strength might be the very thing someone else needs to read today. Thank you for being here.